Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News. I just want to say hello to everyone. I hope you're having a lovely day. Please excuse the outfit. This is 2 days in a row, but I just got done recording a very special interview with none other than John Mappin, the owner of Camelot Castle in Cornwall, UK. That is the same Camelot Castle where a flag with a letter Q emblazoned upon it was flown above the battlements not too long ago. He got a tremendous response to flying that flag, not only among just the people of England, but the people of the world. Many people were fascinated by the idea that Camelot Castle was indeed a real place. Many people were fascinated to learn that this flag could be flown over such an important monument. So today, John Mappin is joining me here in the studio for a pre-recorded interview. I do hope that you enjoy it, and I would like to say that there is a contest afoot. If you would like to take part in the contest and win a stay at Camelot Castle yourself, go ahead and answer the trivia question in the pinned comment below, and I will be choosing a winner from that list of people who respond. So please do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor. Did you guys know that your assets are not actually yours when times get tough? A precious metal IRA with Noble Gold will let you have real hold on your own assets. Precious metal returns are set to explode over the next few years. So get in touch with Noble Gold and discover how you can keep your money safe when you need it. All you need to do is give them a call at 877-646-5347 or go to noblegoldinvestments.com and let them know that Red Pill 78 sent you. Or you can always hit the link below and get the free gold and silver investment guide. Once again, that's 877-646-5347. Tell them Red Pill 78 sent you. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Joining me this evening for a very special interview is my good friend John Mappin of Camelot Castle. John, how are you this evening?
Well, I'm very well, and good evening, Red Pill 78. What can I say?
Just RP, Red Pill.
Red Pill, there we go. There we go. So one has to get the lingo right in these areas. Now, I just want to say what a great honor it is for me to actually be speaking with you, because, of course, your work and what you have done to really help get the truth out there, well, it's mythological. I mean, you really have a fantastic following around the world, not just in America, but as far afield as Kazakhstan, no less. And it's very exciting to actually talk to you in person with this sort of the latest in technology, where we're actually in the middle of the storm is upon us here at Camelot Castle this evening, because I think Hurricane Brendan has just made its way across the Atlantic, and we're being hit by sort of 70-mile-an-hour winds. So if you hear a bit of wind in the background, but we're more or less safe inside the castle here. So here we are. And good evening to all your listeners.
Well, listen, John, the honor is all mine. Thank you very much for saying all that. I do appreciate it. So for people who may not be acquainted with you and what you do, we originally crossed paths because you are the owner and the keeper of Camelot Castle there in Great Britain, just a beautiful historic place, and you had so courageously raised a Q flag above the rampart there at the hotel, and it took the internet by storm. It was all over Twitter, and it really caused a lot of intrigue and interest among the followers of Q online. Not only because maybe people weren't aware that there's a Camelot Castle there, but quite honestly, you are a high-profile figure. You've got over 100,000 followers on Twitter. You are a man of letters, of means, and I think it's it's a big deal when someone of your stature is willing to come out and say, hey, you know, this phenomenon is real. The Great Awakening is happening, and I'm a part of it.
Well, I think it is very real, and certainly more and more people are waking up to the truth. And what I would say to you is that while we may be relatively high profile, we are nowhere near the most high profile of the people who are actually now starting to ask the question, you know, who is Q? What is Q? What is the QAnon movement worldwide? What is its function? What results has it gotten? And these are very, very exciting times. And, you know, I don't think it's a stretch. And forgive me if this sounds a little religious. Some people are religious, some people aren't. I happen to believe that there is a connection with the timings between I believe Q to be somewhat of a spiritual movement.
I would agree.
For those that are close observers of Q, the timing of the flag raising will not have been missed. We raised it on New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, of course, there was a huge freedom break, or a break for freedom, we could say, in relation to the president's actions, which I think surprised even his greatest cynics as to how precise and how spot on and how well his geopolitical moves translated into action. Mm-hmm. So the timing of that was very, very special. And we felt very, you know, actually it's very interesting because I'd had the flag for 3 months here. And I knew that there was going to be a certain moment when we were going to raise that flag. And that's when we did it. And it was a very, very interesting thing. And of course, it was a beautiful sunny day here, and it just looked so fabulous. And I think as a result of that, thousands of new people have asked the question, you know, who is Q? What is Q? What on earth is this John Mappin at Camelot Castle actually doing? And of course, the usual suspects have had a go. You know, our sort of lovely fake news newspapers over here, which you'll be glad to hear that in America, you don't have a monopoly of the fake news. In fact, I have to say that I think the fake news was a British invention.
Oh,
I think it was a British export, so you're very welcome to it. But, you know, since the flag's gone up, of course, I've been accused of being far right, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm not a particularly political creature. To me, the whole left and right thing is a myth. I think it's up or down.
It's a bit of a misdirect, yeah.
Yeah, it's a misdirect, isn't it? Because society either gets better or it gets worse. Mm-hmm. And it gets better if you do the right things, and it gets worse if you do the wrong things. Yeah. So we are either ascending or we are descending.
I definitely believe that we're on the upswing as of right now. I mean, things are looking much better here in America and also in the UK.
Well, you are absolutely right. And of course, you've only got to look at the success that President Trump has had with the stock exchange mm-hmm. In the United States. I mean, it was a great tragedy because I swore that if he won, I would buy into the American stock exchange. But of course, what I said to myself is when he initially wins, there's going to be a dip in the stock exchange, and I'll wait for the dip, and then I will buy. Of course, there was never a dip.
It never went down.
I'm out. I've been waiting for my moment, but of
you
course,
missed the boat.
It's just been America is just going straight up.
It's pretty great.
So, you guys have been doing fantastic. And I think that a lot of that, and I think this is one of the great reveals of the last week, in fact. And what I have found is a lot of people, very, very senior opinion formers in the City of London, friends of mine from the House of Lords, various different political figures, but also financial figures, have been saying to me, what is this Q network? And if you take away, perhaps some of the more esoteric or out there notions as to what Q might be, but you just get into the common sense of it. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a group of truth seekers that are willing to look and are willing to examine information and data, and then they think for themselves.
Yes. Yeah,
and that is the mainstream media's worst nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
See, the idea that I can just pick up the phone to you and we can have a chat and we can discuss a few simple ideas, and that other people can look at that and then they can think for themselves. See, it bypasses the whole rule, which is the only way that you get to the truth is through me, when you are a mainstream newspaper outlet or a cable channel or so on and so forth. And I don't think the mainstream media has any idea the numbers involved with Q. And you've only got to look at I think when we raised the flag on the roof of Camelot, I think I'd just gone up to the Christmas, it was New Year's Eve, and we'd gone up to do a little bit of shopping we were doing a New Year's Eve party. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got to the supermarket, there were 10,000 views. And by the time I got back from the supermarket, there was 40,000 views.
Wow.
And I think that night it ended up at sort of 175,000 views of a simple flag being raised on a roof. So this is huge, what we call meme velocity.
Yes, definitely.
And I suppose the message I have for my friends in Q in the United States is you have done the most spectacular job of keeping the truth alive. And even that person who perhaps has 10 followers and only ever gets one retweet a month mm-hmm. or something, or, perhaps never has even had one. Don't stop, don't give up, because that could be the one message that gets through to the right person. And that is the power and the leverage. And I think that's the magical nature
absolutely
of what's occurring,
I have people who approach me all the time and say, I want to do something. I want to help out. How can I take part? And I say, you already are. I mean, just the very fact that you are putting out information, you are helping us to spread that information. We're all part of one cohesive unit because we're all working towards the same goal. So it's very important. Every single person, every single gear in this giant awakening machine has its own specific purpose. Now, can you tell me about some of the responses that you've had from people either in your life or there in the UK, or perhaps I know you have a lot of connections back here in America after people saw you flying the Q flag?
No, well, I have had. And I'm not going to say who, because I think it's still, listen, I know that Q is simply a group of truth seekers trying to find out the truth and expose the truth to others,
mm-hmm.
And they're a very courageous group of people.
Yes.
But there are still people who perhaps would prefer to stay with what I would call a more mainstream. Actually, I think Q is mainstream.
Yes.
But there are a few. So I'm not going to give names
sure.
per se. But what I can tell you is that if you think about the great freedom winning campaigns in the world right now, whether that be the Trump campaign or whether that be some of the evangelical campaigns in America, which I think are very, very important. For instance, people like Liberty University, various other different evangelical groups, we have received acknowledgements from the very, very top
wow.
of those campaigns, who have just sort of either, it could have been as little as a thumbs up to say, well done, keep going, or, longer communications. And people really, the one thing that the human spirit really appreciates is the truth.
Yes.
And they don't really mind where it comes from. Now, because I've been asked this, I should really clarify this. I am not in any way, shape, or form financially involved with American politics in any way, shape, or form. But an idea can travel from here to America, or it can travel from America to here. And as many people know, I was asked by Charlie Kirk, who is the founder of Turning Point in the United States, to help get Turning Point started over here in the UK. And he said, well, I'm coming over for dinner. Why don't we have a dinner for 3 or 4 people in London, bring a couple of like-minded people along? So I thought, well, I'll hire a room for 30. And we hosted a fantastic event. You can actually find it on YouTube. It's very well worth, you can Google it up. And the launch of Turning Point UK, 250 people turned up.
Wow.
And we financed it overnight. We put a fantastic fellow in charge, a guy called Ollie Annisfeld, whose father is one of the Brexit MPs. And that movement is now the most effective conservative movement in the UK for young conservatives.
Do you think this had anything to do with the recent victory of Boris Johnson? Did you guys help out in his campaign?
I will say this, at the event, and you can see this on the video, Charlie Kirk was the person to say, you need to point out Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Semitism.
There you go.
And then the next day, he did an interview with the Telegraph, with the lead reporter of the Telegraph, and he said the same thing, and then that was reported in the Telegraph. And of course, the left has been playing with anti-Semitism for a very, very long time. Where people get very confused is, you know, in Germany, that was a left-wing, you know, Hitler went for the Jewish people there in Germany, obviously. Mm-hmm. This was a left-wing operation. And the left has been really had a tremendous amount of trouble with racism within its party. You know, the Democrats in America, you know, this was the party of slavery. Mm-hmm. So the conservative movement has been you know, these are the guys that abolished slavery.
Absolutely.
And so it's really the tradition of the Republicans and the conservative movement that have made the moves to free man down through history. So, yes, I mean, I actually introduced Charlie that night, and I said this is probably the most important philosophical export from America since Thomas Jefferson moved to Paris, which, of course, if you remember, Jefferson became ambassador for Paris. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was a very, very important moment, because that's what triggered the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And this was a very, very serious situation. So, yes, I would say that we definitely helped with that. And also we helped in the launch of the Brexit Party. We weren't necessarily principal players in that, but certainly we supported Nigel Farage and, in fact, gave a little tea party at the Ritz Hotel to help launch his party a few days before the official launch. So he came along to that, and of course that was well reported as well. So yes, I definitely think Turning Point has been a great, great asset, and we're looking forward to working, and we are now working with many of the mainstream politicians in the UK, and they're supporting us and we're supporting them. So yes, we're deeply involved with that. Although on a day-to-day basis, you know, we just helped launch it, and yes, I passed it on to Ollie to run it. So,
Well, I would imagine that many of the politicians there in the UK are kind of reading the writing on the wall. I mean, Boris Johnson had one of the largest victories that I've ever seen there in the UK. I mean, I believe that it was the biggest in quite a few decades. And now that your country is getting to the point where the Brexit, I mean, it's already been voted on. The people have said that this is what we want, but now it's official. I mean, this is going to happen very, very soon. If I'm not mistaken, like by the end of the month, everything is supposed to be put together.
That's correct.
The economic situation in Britain looks to be even brighter on the horizon, because that's going to open your country back up to a lot more freedom in terms of what you can do, industry that can come back, products that you guys can make, products that you can import or export from other countries. How do you see the impending Brexit finale impacting your country?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is thank you, President Trump. Thank you to all the freedom fighters in America, because no President Trump, no Brexit.
Yep.
And no freedom fighters in America, no Brexit. And we would have been into a whole socialist degradation that would have lasted for decades. In fact, I don't think England would ever have recovered.
Yeah.
So the great experiment in freedom, which we call America, frankly, you saved us in the Second World War. Well, you saved us in the First World War. You saved us in the Second World War, and you have saved us with the Brexit. And the initial vote, there's no way that would have occurred without Trump's communication going into the Twitter sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And, Dan Scavino, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. In fact,
as do I.
I would say that Dan Scavino is probably, in fact, it was given to me on very, very good authority, and I agree with this, that he is probably the second most influential man in America.
I would have to agree. He's got a very, very close relationship with President Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
They spend about 5 hours a day together.
Yeah.
They are very, very close. He has his finger on the pulse. Everybody played a part in this. And the fortunes, one of the things that I have been passionate about and am passionate about is the restoration of the special relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what was so sad to me was to see these socialists and what we call the Liberal Party over here, which is sort of a mishmash of ideas, really. I don't think it even knows what it does these days. But really dissing the importance of Britain's relationship with America.
Yeah.
And telling our people to put their stock into Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is the British and the Europeans, it may be physically the same continent,
mm-hmm.
but we are very, very different. This is an Anglo-Saxon mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And we are far, far more like Americans. So I think you are completely right. And I think the British economy is going to boom. And I don't think we've seen anything yet with the American economy. I think the American economy is really, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if the New York Stock Exchange doubled.
It's been incredible.
It's been incredible.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was an article today, I think it was in one of the financial journals, which said there is a 0 chance of recession in the foreseeable future.
Yeah. As long as the Fed doesn't get in the way, then we should be good to go.
Well, they tried their best to hurt Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Fed was used as a weapon to try to stop the growth. But, the thing about America, and I was very, very blessed because I've lived in America for 6 years. And I've learned an incredible amount from America. And what people who have not spent time in America don't understand, they don't understand the American spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And the survival capacity of even an American who, let's say, is, I don't know how to say this, but is not educated in traditional terms.
Mm-hmm.
He just knows how to do his job, but his pride in his job and what he's doing, he may not be an academic, but there's tremendous horsepower and tremendous passion that he will invest into the economy. And I think that is what Trump has managed to bring out.
He's captured it again.
He's started to bring it out, because there's still people who don't quite believe it. And of course, we're seeing a lot of people now. One of the things I found, because of course, shortly after we raised the flag, I released my little rap tune, which was sort of.
I shared it. I loved it.
Which, of course, so I'm fully aware that I'm the least rap star that anybody could possibly imagine. And that was one of the reasons that I thought, well, let's have a go. But, since I released it, I've had many approaches from the black community. And in fact, the person who started the thing, he's called
Bryson Gray.
Bryson Gray. I spoke to him on the phone.
Yep.
And he is now in the process of arranging to come to Camelot.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we're going to do a little round table rap together.
There you go. He's a great guy.
He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And I tell you who else has been incredibly supportive, and I'm hoping to do an exhibition of his paintings here at Camelot Castle, or his cartoons, and that's Ben Garrison.
Oh, I'm trying to get him on the show right now.
Well, he will see this, and I would love to do an exhibition of some of his cartoons, or because I think as an artist, he is somebody who has followed the movement really from the very, very beginning. And he's done really marvelously, I think.
Yes, I agree.
So Ben has become a great, what I would call, Twitter buddy.
There you go.
And his wife is incredible. And it was I think he's really spectacular, and very, very interesting. So I've had great feedback from all sorts of people. But what I've noticed is that the black community in America and the Latino community, there's another friend of mine, Joy Vila, who's been doing, she wore the MAGA dress to the Emmys or something, you remember that? And she has really started to unlock the votes there, I think, in the black community. So that's exciting.
What's great about it is the people who support President Trump, regardless of their ethnicity, they see themselves as Americans. So it's almost like you have everybody on the left who hates Donald Trump, and then you have everybody, which is a wide diaspora, different spectrums of different types of people who consider themselves to be patriots and Americans, and they support the president. And so we can all talk to each other no matter what our backgrounds or no matter what our ethnicity, because we have that one thing in common. The only thing that the people on the left have in common is their hatred of Donald Trump. They are still fractured even amongst each other. If you are, if you're a white male, okay, and you don't like Donald Trump, you're always going to be a white male. And therefore, you are lesser than anybody else who hates Donald Trump. And it just spreads out through all the different types of people who are on the left-hand side of the aisle. But it is incredible the way that he's been able to bring people together among, around this common cause, just making this country great again. And not only this country, but also bringing that to the world. It's been amazing to watch all of these other countries, slowly. You're right. It's affected Italy. It's affected Austria. It's affected Norway. There was a guy called me from Norway the other day. He said, I've seen everything that you're doing. Can I come and see you? It's extraordinary what's happening. Britain, France. I mean, all the riots that are occurring in France, you see, there's a simple idea which I came across actually in America, which is when you bring order to something, the first thing that happens is you see confusion. In other words, it's rather like this. If you go into a company and it's a mess and people have been stealing money from the till, and you go in there as a responsible executive and say, right, we're going to bring order to this thing. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is all the people that have been stealing from you, they're going to attack you because they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose the money that they've been taking. So always when you go in to do what I would call a debug,
or to bring order, the first thing you see is confusion. And the great temptation is to get distracted by the confusion. And what President Trump doesn't do is get distracted by the confusion. He just carries on, and he just step by step brings order. He is, in fact, a genius administrator.
Absolutely.
And
100.
So that is what I have seen. And of course, that is spreading. So the ideas, Dan Scavino put out this thing the other day, Trump's tweets matter.
Yeah, it's true.
Now,
I saw it.
You know what? I put that up on my Twitter feed, and I actually made a suggestion. I said, if everybody following me simply took it upon themselves to retweet Trump's tweets, it would accelerate, because people have written to me, as they've written to you, what could I do? What can I do? Well, the minimum that you can do is retweet his tweets on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. That takes you 10 minutes a day, right?
Yep.
Right there, if your followers did that, and if my followers did that, I think we would accelerate the Great Awakening by a factor of 10. It would 10x it, you see?
Oh, yeah.
Because truth, when you inject truth into an area, the lies eventually leave. But you have to keep on injecting the truth.
Yep.
So that's what's happening in France. Of course, they were rioting again this weekend against Macron's sort of socialist measures and so on and so forth. And the economy there is crashing.
I'm actually, I'm shocked by how long this unrest has been going on in France. Do you have any insight into how Macron has not completely lost it all? I'm
amazed, that they haven't chopped his head off. The French, I always say the French, as soon as if you can distract them from food and sex, they're quite effective. They haven't been distracted from food and sex sufficiently. But of course, the French Revolution, started off very mild, and then they got going. And of course, 40,000 heads later, in the Place de la Concorde, Madame la Guillotine had her say. But I'm amazed that the French haven't actually turfed him out. But I also think that he's taken pretty extreme police measures. They're using tear gas on the citizens, and they have pretty tough riot police, far worse than anything in England. On
the other side of that, how are they stopping this information from getting out? You've got people in the streets on an almost daily basis, and the mainstream media, they've been able to basically ignore it this entire time. You've got a smattering of coverage here and there, but you would think if you're just a normal person reading, whatever your daily paper is, or watching CNN or MSNBC, you would think that it's all, poppies and milk over there in France. Nothing to speak of.
Well, I think one of the things where America has a huge advantage is the evangelical groups. You see, church attendance in America I think it's roughly in the order of 60%. Roughly 60% of Americans go to church on a Sunday. Now, in Europe, it's far, far lower. See, what happened is the churches in Europe got infiltrated. It was after the First World War, and the churches couldn't work out how to get church attendance back up. So they hired psychologists to train the priests.
What could go wrong?
Very, very interesting thing. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Because the psychologist is operating on the basis that man is an animal and is purely the sum of his chemical parts. A priest is supposed to be reminding you, you are a spirit, you are immortal, life goes on.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're a Buddhist priest, a Muslim priest, or a Christian priest. That's essentially the message. So you don't hire a psychologist or a psychiatrist to teach to train a priest. Of course, that sent things from bad to worse. So church attendance in England is roughly 1%.
Oh, wow.
1%. So you see, you've got these powerful networks of freedom, because we are really witnessing a spiritual evolution, where the epicenter is, the philosophical epicenter is the United States.
I agree.
You know, and at the center of that, you know, I was probably one of the first people to point out that President Trump is a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And what he is exporting is the most advanced political philosophy ever to have been exported to this world. You see, his IQ, you see, one of the things, it was very interesting. The BBC called me up because we predicted when he announced the meeting with President Kim.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a little algorithm that allows us to predict these outcomes and so on and so forth, which we'll go into later. But
okay.
The BBC called me up and they said, well, how did you at Camelot Castle, how did you know that this was going to happen? And I said, well, and why? They said, well, why is it that the media keeps misunderstanding President Trump? And I said, it's very simple. The mainstream media are just not used to dealing with somebody with that level of IQ in the White House. They're used to dealing with somebody much stupider in the White House. Mm-hmm. And they said, what, you mean Obama was a lower IQ? Of course, I said, of course he was a lower IQ than Trump. Yeah. Trump is operating at an intelligence level that is 25 moves ahead of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost the plot on election night. I called it the Pennsylvania penny dropped. Pennsylvania went. They went, oh, we better start campaigning about Trump.
Oh,
they hadn't even campaigned. If you remember, Pennsylvania went, the Mexican peso dropped,
mm-hmm.
then one of the others went, then Florida went.
Yeah.
And then they said, oh, well, you know, it looks as if he's going to win the election. Oh, we'd better start campaigning. They had not been campaigning against Trump.
Mm-mm.
So they just hadn't anticipated the IQ. They didn't realize who they were playing with.
Well, they vastly underestimated his abilities. I mean, even more than not preparing to deal with somebody of above average intelligence, they assumed that he was a simpleton and that everything he does is about him being a bumbling idiot, when in fact it's like strictly calculated.
I will tell you something here. We had a call from the Koreans. Do you remember when Trump cancelled his meeting with President Kim?
Yes.
Well, through our media contacts, I had some friends in Korea, and they said, listen, we've got a representative from Korea, and they want to come and see you at Camelot. Could you, because they don't understand this letter.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so this fellow came down from South Korea, and he brought with him a fellow from North Korea. Well, I'd never met anybody from North Korea, so I thought it was rather interesting.
Yeah.
And they filmed me. They said, can we interview about Trump and film this? I said, well, yes, you can, providing I film it too, because I really, you know. And they just wanted to know, well, what does he mean by this letter? And I said, listen, you're not getting it. If Trump says he wants a cup of tea, that's what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want orange juice. He doesn't want coffee. He wants a cup of tea. Mm. And it literally took several hours with these people. And finally, the North Korean said to me, I see what you're saying. Trump is a simple man. I said, yes, but not simple, stupid. He said, no, our wisest men in Korea are simple because they can express complex subjects in a simple way. I said, well, there you go.
Yes.
That is why he is clever. And you see, the ability to get one's ideas over in an information age where, let's face it, we are all bombarded with 1,000 adverts a day. Somebody showed me the figures once as to how many messages one is actually bombarded with in a day and how many ideas one is hit with compared with what it was in the 60s. So to get your message over at something like third of the spend. I mean, I think he spent about a third of the money of Clinton.
And Twitter has been an incredible piece of that because whereas he was not given the coverage by the mainstream media, or he was disparaged when they did speak about him, he's able to use his Twitter profile to speak to the American public directly. And then we have that magnification effect when people like you and I do retweet his information, or I'm covering it on my show. And it's
very
incredible.
leveraged. I mean, what you've done, and what you are doing,
thank you,
Red Pill RP, is phenomenal, and you should not underestimate it at all.
Appreciate it.
You know, it is very, very, very leveraged indeed. And if I were to tell you who will be watching this interview tonight, you would be very pleased indeed. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, sweet.
Would be very pleased indeed, because your words are reaching not just the hundreds of thousands of people that you do reach every week, but opinion formers, opinion creators, people that are actually sculpting or shaping the future. Because of course, that's what leaders do: is they shape the future.
Absolutely.
And that's why, So. People do underestimate his intelligence. And so when I said this to the BBC, of course, the fellow it was a bit early in the morning for him, because he was calling me very early. I was in Florida, luckily, because I'd just been out to see up to DC and myself. And he couldn't believe it. He said, "What, you mean that, are you actually saying that President Obama and the Clintons were of a lower IQ than President Trump?" I said, "Well, absolutely,
without a doubt,
by many, 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 many times." And there's another factor which people don't realize. Trump is very spiritual, and he is a deeply, deeply Christian soul. And his wife, Melania, who I've been fortunate to be in her presence on a couple of occasions now, is absolutely ethereal. She is an ethereal spirit, and she has a deep, deep Christian faith and belief and relationship with God. And there is actually more prayer occurring in the White House in this administration than probably the last 10 administrations combined.
I was going to say the same thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's another wonderful thing about President Trump. I mean, and why I too believe that the Great Awakening is a spiritual movement as much as anything else, because President Trump came into office at a time when to believe in God, to have a faith in God, and to express it openly, you're chastised for that. You are made to feel as if, there's something wrong with you if you don't subscribe to
God
this.
God was basically being suppressed on this planet.
Yes,
God
yes.
was being suppressed. And what Trump has done is he has unsuppressed God. And by the way, he hasn't just done it with the Christian faith.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, he went to Saudi Arabia, and the first foreign visit that he made was in Saudi Arabia. And actually, a friend of mine helped with the speech writing for the speech that he delivered. I mean, Trump is very involved with his own speeches, but of course he has people that help him. And the speech that he delivered in Saudi Arabia was incredibly respectful. And he is loved in Muslim countries. And this is something that, of course, when it comes to the subject of extremism, that's a completely different subject. But I'm talking about, the spiritual people over there see that he has respect for God as they interpret God. And in Israel, for instance, obviously his daughter is Jewish and his son-in-law is Jewish. The respect that he has for Israel, I don't know if you remember during the campaign, his AIPAC speech was absolutely fantastic. And I think that was a clue for a lot of us who could see that. But he's unsuppressed God, and he has made and put religious freedom at the very, very top of this planet's agenda. At the very, very top of this planet's agenda.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because it's a very inclusive spiritual worldview that he has. And And I think that may prove to be, legacy-wise, one of his greatest gifts. I don't want to say his greatest because I don't want to limit.
There's so many.
Why limit him? Why limit him?
Yeah.
I think it's limitless what he can achieve now with the momentum. And there's certainly plenty of stuff that does need to be cleaned up, because man is being suppressed in many, many areas. And of course, I think the Q movement has been a major player of that too.
Absolutely.
I see what Trump is doing and what the Q movement is doing as an absolute symbiosis. And, one hand can't clap without the other, really.
For sure.
It's a beautiful thing.
Now, you mentioned being in the presence of our First Lady, and just you have a bit of a personal relationship with the president, don't you?
Well, I don't want to, speak for him, obviously. It's rather like if you meet Her Majesty in this country,
sure.
It's never right to discuss, what is said with the head of state.
Of course.
But what happened is that I was given, in 1990, I was given what is essentially an algorithm, which is a way of analyzing data, which allows a person to predict outcome. You could say to predict the future. You could say that. And it doesn't necessarily apply to every area of life, but it applies to data streams. And so when Trump announced his election, his candidacy, we came down the escalator. We applied our algorithm to the data that was coming out of America and how the rest of the world was receiving that knowledge. And we knew within 3 hours that he would win. And so what occurred is that I knew that nobody would believe me. So what I did is I took the entire book at William Hill, which is a bookmakers in England. You can actually place money. And the odds at the time were 33-1. So as a marker, because I thought, well, if I tell Red Pill 78, I knew that Trump was going to win within 3 hours. Of course, he wouldn't believe me. But if I was to say, 4 years later, if I would say, well, here are the betting slips, and I put the bet on within 3 hours. So I put 36 bets on at 33-1. And of course, the bookmakers were very cheeky, and they leaked the story of the bet to the newspapers in England. Well, of course, this generated a lot of publicity, and the family heard about this. And so when Trump won, his son, Eric, called me and said, well, John, we saw what you did, and we've seen how supportive you've been. If you are ever in Washington, do come and say hello.
Wow.
And so when I was next in America, of course, I called up my contact there. And sure enough, there was a fundraiser. I think it was the first fundraiser of the 2020 campaign. I think that Vegas fellow, Wyatt, I can't remember who was hosting it, but somebody was hosting it anyway, and they raised a lot of money.
Okay.
But I was invited to meet with him and with his wife, and he was delighted, in fact, and he'd heard all about it. And he said, he turned to his wife, Melania, and was very, very gracious indeed. But as I said, I'm not going to get into detail of it. And we had a lovely, lovely chat. And of course, then I spent the evening there and had the opportunity to spend time there. And of course, there's been other occasions, where, we went to Mar-a-Lago a couple of Easters ago, and we're with the family there. And it's a lovely, lovely,
incredible
story. And again, the coincidences of it, the probabilities of it all are, if I was to use the word divine to describe it, I don't think it's a stretch for people that are spiritually aware.
No.
I'm sure you yourself have had some of the most extraordinary experiences doing the work that you're doing, and how people come to you, or all of a sudden you get a call from somebody and you suddenly think, well, what is that? Is that my luck? Or are there other factors involved?
And so, God at work in our lives.
Well, yes. And I would say, funnily enough, my own faith has been considerably strengthened.
Me too.
And my relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ has been considerably strengthened by my experience with President Trump. So I'm sure that's been the case for a lot of people, really.
I would have to agree.
Probably increased church attendance, I should imagine. I would have thought.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. No, President Trump has done this country and, all of us a great service in being willing to sacrifice his own life, his own fortune, to give it all to make America a better place. And as I said before, by proxy, the rest of the world. Now, we're running out of time, John, and there's so much that I still wanted to discuss with you. Specifically, we were talking before the show, and it's quite interesting. Meghan and Harry, they're the Duchess, and how do you?
Well, we call it the Markle debacle. It is. I have an opinion that she is being manipulated into becoming a spokesperson that will be used to not just attack the president, but to go for the freedom movement. And there have already been indications. In fact, there was an article today where she had articulated, "I won't be moving to Los Angeles until the president has left the White House." Now, it is a long-standing protocol that the royal family here never gets involved in politics. And it's a very, very serious faux pas. And it is considered to be completely classless when that occurs. It has very, very rarely occurred in the history of the monarchy. In fact, I'd like to say I can think of an occasion. There's one that comes to mind, but it was a very long time ago. And, certainly the modern royal family is absolutely diligent with that. The left have lost all of their icons. Hillary was their great hope. There's no way she's electable now. No. So they have to come up with something new. The existing contenders, the Democrats, really have not served up anything interesting. So really, if you look at the power brokers that are operating behind the curtain, if you like, they're saying to themselves, well, who have we got for 2024? And I'm not necessarily saying that they're teeing her up for a presidential run. Ooh. But you know what? She has already started to use her voice, and she is speaking out. You see, she plays the victim card, very, very well. And there are elements that, would be very, very glad to support her. You can see who she makes friends with, yes, who is empowering her, who she is invalidating, who she is suppressing.
So do you think that this whole thing that's happened in the last couple of days, Meghan and Harry officially stepping away from the royal duties, do you believe that this is all part of a larger plan to position her as some type of a power broker here in the United States? Because to be quite honest with you,
it was reported earlier that Obama's and Clinton's PR team help her out.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So that was reported. I think this is something that people really have to do their own research on, and they have to really think for themselves and look for themselves. I made a very precise observation on Twitter today. A number of other people, have spoken to me. I don't want to say anything that I might later regret.
Sure.
But what I do feel is that if you said to me, is Meghan going to use her voice to advance the Trump movement? See, what's the answer to that question?
Oh, that's a no. That's a no.
Is Meghan going to use her voice and her position to advance friends of Obama and Hillary Clinton?
I would have to say yes. Yeah.
So I haven't said she will or she won't. I've just asked that question. And I think it's a very valid question to ask.
Yeah.
And I think millions and millions of dollars are at stake.
Well, you know what's particularly interesting about it is that Hollywood movie stars are essentially American royalty, the American version of the royal family. You've got dynasties of, famous people, and then you have Prince Harry marrying a movie star. And if they were to come to America and she was to run for some type of political office, then we could potentially have a prince from the royal family in a position of political power here in America.
Well, I believe, correct. I'm not entirely, because I don't know a great deal about her, other than I've just looked at it. It's all happened quite quickly, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
And the other thing is, it's really overshadowed, for instance, all of the joy of Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
It's overshadowed that. It's a very, very interesting time. And all I say is, we live in a world where icons have tremendous power.
Mm-hmm.
Camelot Castle is an icon. And the fact that we flew the Q flag on the roof, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people are now asking, who is Q, what is Q, and they're having a bit of an old Q Google or whatever. That's using an icon, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm a great believer that one should use one's icon to empower good things.
So, okay. So, John, you had to grab your charger, and we are back. So continue with what you were saying.
So just remind me, what was the last thing that we went over specifically?
We were discussing the implications of Meghan and Harry, the various ways that this could possibly go. Actually, to be quite honest with you, it seemed like you were nearing the end of your thought. But we had talked about, this is going back a little bit, but we had previously discussed some of your time here in D.C. And your interactions with other high-level people, not only in the British government, but people in the American political sphere or certain levels of the American government.
There was that.
Yeah.
And I'll cover that, and maybe I'll come back to the Meghan and Harry thing, because when I was over in DC, do you remember when the Kavanaugh hearing occurred?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I had been in Florida, and this Supreme Court ruling was so important because, of course, what was about to happen if they hadn't ruled in Kavanaugh's favor is we were about to throw out, equal justice for all, the rule of law, the idea that one is innocent until proven guilty. That hadn't been, challenged since the time of Emperor Justinian. This was a very, very important time. So I was in Florida, and I actually flew up to DC because I wanted to be in DC. And I arrived there, and a friend of mine invited me actually to attend the Senate and gave me a ticket to be there at the Senate. Wow. Which was extraordinary because the energy in DC at that time was absolutely, there was demonstrations going on, and, the left was going crazy. And there was a private dinner in the Trump Hotel that I was invited to, and I happened to sit next to somebody who was very, very, very high up in the US government. And at that time, I didn't know a great deal about Q. I hadn't really researched it. But I'd heard about it, and I'd heard some of its more, let's say, anybody can Google about it. So sure. I'd heard a little bit about it. And I said to the fellow on my left, who I cannot tell you his name, but I said to him, now listen, I read a lot about on the internet. I read it all. You know, the good with the bad, the up with the down, the right with the left. I read it all. I've read about this Q thing. Is it all absolute bunkum, or is there something to it? And he said to me, not only is there something to it, there's a lot more to it than anyone could possibly imagine.
Yeah. Don't
discount it. Now, in his position, he is somebody who I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do exactly that. I'm not going to discount it. So, you know, I'm not saying, and I want to make it very, very clear, that whatever is posted on a Q internet message board on the internet, I immediately say, well, that must be gospel truth.
Right.
I think for myself and I look for myself. But what I can tell you is that I have personally witnessed ideas that have been placed onto those message boards that have subsequently happened.
Exactly.
And have subsequently occurred, or have shifted the narrative. And of course, with everybody being so connected as they are today, an idea can start over there in DC, and before you know it, it's affecting things in China, it's affecting things in Japan. The world is very, very connected. It takes a nanosecond for your video stream to reach England. And that's a thing of great beauty. And of course, with that power comes tremendous, tremendous, tremendous responsibility.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that the Q movement is doing, and this is where I actually take my hat off. And it was funny, I was with a senior judge over the weekend, and he said something to me. I said, it must be a very interesting thing to sit in judgment and to instruct a jury and so forth. He said, you know, you talk about law and order. Well, the law comes before order, you see. And it was and I thought, you know, that's interesting, because a lot of what Q is about is natural law. You see, it's putting ideas there. It's educating people into the natural laws of life. Now, without the laws, you don't have order. So if you want to bring order, so my point is that we are at a very, very, very interesting time. And that conversation in DC, I have to say, was very life-changing for me, because of course I started to look at the whole thing in it with a very, very different pair of eyes. And he was a very sincere individual, and is, you know, still to this day very active in DC politics. And, you know, I'm not going to say which branch of the government he's in, but, you know, you can probably get an idea.
Sure.
You know,
oh, it gives me chills just to know.
Well, I think it's interesting and it's very positive.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I would say to anybody listening, don't ever take my word for anything. You know, I was educated in the sciences, and I went to probably one of the oldest schools in England. I was at Winchester College. And I had an old physics teacher that got hold of me one day. He was the same guy that taught Freeman Dyson, who is the leader in quantum mechanics. He said to me, he said, John, if somebody tells you that water boils at 100 degrees and you believe them, you're a bloody idiot. Because it doesn't. It boils at 99.8 degrees, or 99.99 degrees. And he said, if you believe them when they tell you that, you're still a bloody idiot, because it only does that at sea level. And he said, if you believe them when they tell you that, you're still an idiot, because it only does that at a certain barometric pressure. And if you believe them when they tell you that, you're still an idiot, because the water has to be a certain purity. And he said, if you still believe them, you're still an idiot, because you haven't checked it for yourself. And that is scientific method. So I think the great message of Q is start to look. Once you've looked, think for yourself, and then once you've done those things, by all means act.
Yes.
Act in the right direction.
I always say on my channel, trust but verify. Don't take anything that I say or that anybody else says as gospel. You want to go ahead and research it, get your own information, and then make an informed decision and act upon it.
Yeah. So in that sense, going back to the Markle debacle, people have to think for themselves. But I think the two most important questions in relation to that are, if she becomes a powerful planetary voice, which, by the way, she already is. So if that is strengthened, is she going to support the freedom movement? And is she going to support, let's say, President Trump and what he's doing? Or is she going to support the socialist movement in America, or the Obama style and the Clinton style of operation?
Yeah.
Who is she going to be empowering?
I tend to think the latter, yeah.
And is it right for the British monarchy to be used in that way? Because the Queen, actually, she is the Queen of England, but she is also head of the Commonwealth. But she also, funnily enough, plays a role in everybody's life. She has a spiritual role. One of the best books to read, if you really want to understand this subject, is Walter Bagehot, who wrote a book called The English Constitution. And he talks about the dignified role of the monarchy and the efficient role of government and how they interact. It's well worth reading. You can get it on Kindle, actually. It's an excellent book. But, I can guarantee to you that it's going to happen eventually, at the point that Her Majesty does leave this world for the next. There'll be a lot of people in America that are quite sad about that.
Yeah.
It's not that she has no global role in our lives, because you've grown up with her, and for that to be used or hijacked in any way to play any type of a political part in the future of the world is wrong. And Meghan should have known that before she married into it. And Harry certainly knows better.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So that's all I would say on that subject.
All right. Well, John, tell people how they can reach you. Tell people how they can come visit Camelot, because I would imagine after seeing this, people are going to be very interested.
Well, what I'd like to do is I will give a prize to any one of your listeners. You have to work out a competition.
Okay.
And they can come and stay at Camelot Castle, let's say for 3 nights, as our guest, absolutely free. They can drink what they like within reason, eat what they like within reason, and we'll look after them. But you can create a competition on that. You can find Camelot Castle, camelotcastle.com. You can follow me on Twitter at John Mappin. And, if there was one thing I would say, follow and retweet President Trump, Dan Scavino, Brad Parscale, Charlie Kirk, and also I tell you who's a real rising star is Katrina Pearson.
Yeah,
really interesting. And also there's another one, Dr. Gina. You'll find her. She's very close with the president.
Okay.
So I would, because we have developed friendships in DC, and part of me can be very, very open, and I am very open on social media. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on wherever. I am very open. But of course, with my personal relationships, I always do respect those. So if you were to tell me something in confidence, well, then obviously I'm going to respect that. But what I try to do on social media is leave clues. I do try to leave clues. So if you take a look at my Twitter stream over the last, let's say, 3 weeks, any follower of Q would probably find that very interesting indeed.
All right.
And they will be able, if you can read the Q data with a high level of understanding, you would certainly get a great deal out of, what's been revealed there.
That's pretty neat.
And what I can tell you is the best is yet to come.
Right.
There are things in the pipeline. Charlie Kirk, I would say, is an extraordinary rising star, Don Jr., extraordinary. Watch these guys, watch what they communicate about, follow their lead, and get out as much data as you can. Retweet these people as a point of duty. As a point of, it's almost, I would say, it's a spiritual mission. And then the other thing I would say is, don't discount the hand of God in all of this. And I think that is perhaps the most important thing that we discuss this evening, is the role of the Creator in all of this. I think we are witnessing with the president is the manifestation of God's will on earth. I don't see any other way of explaining it. And I know that some people have a hard time with that idea, certainly people who themselves, have a hard time understanding that. But from what I have seen, that is what we are witnessing. And it's a glorious time to be alive. And thank you, Red Pill, for giving me this opportunity to communicate. And you, of course, will be guest of honor at the round table. In fact, I would love to do a broadcast from the round table of your show. I think it would be a historic moment, and let's create an event to do that. We're only a short air flight away.
I would love that. I've never been to the UK, so.
Well, I mean, it's this. You'd love Cornwall. Cornwall is absolutely beautiful. It's lovely. Lovely time to come here is actually end of April.
Okay.
All flowers are out. So let's find an event. Let's find a debate. Let's find a discussion, and we'll have the real roundtable discussion here.
I would love it.
And we'll gather a few knights, you see, and some freedom fighters, and maybe you can host the event or something. I think it would be a beautiful thing to do. And what we want to do is use this icon. King Arthur was probably one of the first freedom fighters, and our castle sits at his birthplace. So it's a very special thing to be a guardian of. We're guardians of that, and we look after it. And the mythology of King Arthur is very important, and it has this unique relationship with American politics, of course, because the Kennedy administration was known as Camelot, as you remember. So, yes, come here soon.
All right. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. I will definitely take you up on that. And you guys heard it here first. We are going to do a contest, and you can win your own stay at Camelot Castle. John, I agree with you on every point that you just made. This is most certainly God's hand at work, both here in America and abroad. And Donald Trump is fulfilling his wishes here on Earth. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I want to let you know that you are welcome back anytime, and we will be speaking very, very soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, guys, thanks again for watching, and don't forget to check the pinned comment below so you can win a stay at Camelot Castle in Cornwall, UK. Answer the question, answer it correctly, and from among the correct answers, I will choose the winner, and I will be notifying you guys in the next video. Thanks again, guys. It's been a blast. Good luck, and God bless.